Chapter 8. Third Conjugation. Chapter 8 covers the following: how to form the present, imperfect, and future tenses in third conjugation, including the infinitive and imperative mood. At the end of the lesson, we'll review the vocabulary which you should memorize in this chapter. Here are two important rules for you to remember. Rule 1. The thematic vowel in third conjugation is a short vowel. It appears as I or you in the present and E in the imperfect. Rule 2. The tense sign for the future in third conjugation is E. The future tense in third conjugation uses no thematic vowel. As you can tell from that introduction, this is a relatively short chapter, which should come as a welcome relief. But it's not necessarily an easy chapter. Third conjugation has the most number of irregularities of the 4 conjugations in Latin. Here is an example of a third conjugation verb, scribo, which means write, conjugated in the present tense. Scribo, scribis, scribit, scribimus, scribitis, scribunt. Notice that the formation of the present tense in third conjugation follows a pattern similar to that seen in first and second conjugation. Take a third conjugation verb base, add a thematic vowel, which will be fairly irregular in this conjugation, and to that append personal endings. Note that the personal endings are the same as those in first and second conjugation. But, unlike the A which dominates first conjugation, or the strong E which dominates second, third uses a short vowel, which readily changes form as it encounters different consonants. It will appear as I in the second person and third person singular and the first and second person plural. In the third person plural, it appears as you, and in the first person singular, there's no thematic vowel, the same way the A in first conjugation disappears in forms like laudo or amo. The translation of third conjugation verbs differs in no way from verbs in first and second conjugation, so there's no point in rehearsing what you already know. Scribo, for instance, would translate as I write, I am writing, I do write, and the other persons and numbers would follow the same pattern. The imperfect tense in third conjugation poses even fewer problems than the present. Just like in first and second conjugation, it uses BA as the marker for the imperfect. Thus, the imperfect of scribo goes scribebam, scribebas, and so on. Note that, unlike in the present, the thematic vowel in the imperfect is E. The imperfect tense in third conjugation translates the same way it does in first and second. It denotes an incomplete or repeated action in the past, and therefore scribebam translates as I was writing, I used to write, I kept on writing. The rest of the translations should be self-evident. The one real challenge presented by third conjugation is its future tense. Unlike the bo-bis bit business you're used to from first and second conjugation, third conjugation uses E as its future tense marker, clear proof that we do not live in a perfect world. This E, which is easily confused with the second conjugation thematic vowel, will present manifold challenges, and only goes to demonstrate how important it is to distinguish between second and third conjugation verbs. And to make matters only worse, the E isn't used universally. In the first person singular, the future tense marker is A, rendering a conjugation that looks like scribam, I will write, scribes, you will write, scribet, he will write, and so on. And even worse yet, note that this tense marker eats up the thematic vowel, so there's no thematic vowel at all in third conjugation future. But the thematic vowel returns in the imperative mood. The imperative singular in third conjugation uses E. So, for instance, the imperative singular of scribo is scribe with a short E, meaning write! But just to be perverse as far as I can tell, the plural uses I, plus te, the ending you would expect from first and second conjugation, producing scribete, y'all write! And as if that weren't enough, there are 4 irregular verbs, 2 of them third conjugation, which have irregular imperative singulars: dico, duco, fero, and facio. producing 4 imperative forms which, said one after another, sound like a nursery rhyme. Deek, duke, fock, fair. Gently down the stream. Finally, in comparison with all that, the infinitive will look like an old friend. It uses a short E thematic vowel, producing an ending ERE, as in scribere, to write. Let's end this lesson by looking at the vocabulary in Chapter 8. The first word is copia, copiae, feminine, meaning abundance or supply. It's a first declension feminine noun. Like mores and animi, the plural of this word provides insight into Roman psychology and society. The plural, which means literally supplies, meant to the Romans troops or forces. That shows what they cared about being supplied with, an assumption that drips with a militarism that made the Romans the success and terror they were in the ancient world. The next word, ratio rationis feminine, is a third declension feminine noun meaning calculation, reason, judgment, consideration, system, manner, and method. An impressive array of definitions, which become comprehensible when you look at the etymological meaning of the word. Ra means reckoning, and tio means the process of. So the word means the process of making any kind of reckoning. In particular, a calculation, which of course involves reason. If it's ethical, then judgment, which entails careful consideration, and a systematic manner and method of proceeding. To the Romans, it really was a very simple word. It meant what you do in your mind when you add up 1 and 1 and get 2. Let's practice a little rationem. What would be the genitive plural of this word? Remember, it's third declension. That's better. Rationum. The next 2 words are prepositions. The first one, ad, means to, toward, up to, or near to, and its object is always in the accusative case. So if you wanted to say, for instance, toward the fatherland, as in I looked toward the fatherland, you would say ad patriam. The second preposition, a or ex, means the opposite. Out of, from, and also by reason of, on account of. It takes an ablative object. The forms a and ex are interchangeable, so a Roman could say a patria or ex patria, and in either case mean from the fatherland. From is the literal meaning of ex, but ex also has a figurative meaning, by reason of or on account of. A sense it shares with our preposition out of, as in, they did it out of fear, meaning on account of fear. For this preposition to have this sense, the object must be an abstract noun. So no one will be running from the house, meaning on account of the house, unless we're in some sort of Latin horror movie. Next word. Dum. Not dumb, unless you forget that it means while, in which case it is dumb. Dum is a conjunction that introduces a clause. A clause is a little sub-sentence within a larger sentence. We'll talk about clauses more later, a lot more later. Dum is a conjunction signaling that 2 things are happening at once. The next word is ago agere, a verb. It means do, drive, lead, act, pass, or spend. It's a third conjugation verb. Note the short E in the infinitive, agere, versus the long E you would find in the infinitive of a second conjugation verb like monere. The reason this word has so many meanings is because it is one of the most widely used verbs in Latin. It is really equivalent, if anything is in Latin, to the English verb do. This means it's very hard to figure out what agere means unless you're in a context. And almost always what determines that meaning is its direct object. The same is true of English do. Think about all the different meanings do can have, such as do breakfast, do a meeting, or do your hair. The same is true in Latin. The idiom vitam agere, to do life literally, means to live life or lead life. Another example is gratias agere, to do or derive thanks, meaning to give thanks, or simply to thank. But the translation thank brings with it a complication you should be aware of. The Latin idiom to do or drive, that is, give thanks, expects an indirect object. You give thanks to someone. Thus, in Latin, that object will be in the dative case. Conversely, the English verb thank takes a direct object, which might lead you to put an accusative object with agere gratias in Latin, and that would be a dire, fatal error. You have been warned. The last three entries in this vocabulary list are all verbs. The first is docio docere, meaning show or teach. It's a second conjugation verb. The next is duco ducere, meaning lead, consider, or regard. It's a third conjugation verb. Look at the difference in the principal parts of these two verbs. Dokeo has eo at the end of its first principal part and a long e in its infinitive. That shows that it's second conjugation. Duco has no e before the o and a short e in its infinitive. That shows that it's third. And another thing to note about this verb is that it has a mental sense. To lead with the mind was to the Romans to consider. Finally, the last vocabulary item in this chapter is scribo scribere, meaning write or compose. It's a third conjugation verb. Because of its sense, scribo can take both an accusative direct object and a dative indirect object. That is, you can write something, accusative direct object, to someone, dative indirect object. Do the rules that were cited at the beginning of this chapter now make sense to you? If not, please review this presentation. If so, please proceed to the next slide. For the next class exercise, print out a copy of the 2-page worksheet for Chapter 8, please. Here is a link to that worksheet. And that's it. That's the end of the presentation for Chapter 8. Vitas bonas agite, o discipuli.